Greeting, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are doing well there, wherever you are. Today, let's talk about the issues or the conceptions and purposes of assessment. So let's deal with the issues. How do we understand, or how do you understand about the issue of assessment? So there are different issues that we may consider. So for this one, how I'll just address it is that first, let's make sure that we know where to get enough information about issues. So for assessment, this is what I've done. I went to Google Scholar and then I typed this concept here, which is conceptions and purposes of assessment. Do you see how many articles are appearing here? So, but the two articles that we have used here are part of these, but they are relevant to what we are discussing in this lecture. Therefore, for more information on assessment, please feel free to go to Google Scholar, and then from Google Scholar, tap the concept there, and then when you tap these issues, it will then give you a list of different sources on the issue of assessment. So once you have this list, you just go there where it says PDF, and then you choose it there. You can read it, or you can save it on your memory stick or hard drive, and then you can read it even offline. But otherwise, you can read it online like that. If you click there, it will open it for you, then you have it. So make use of those when you deal with these issues. So the two articles that I've downloaded are these ones. So when you see this presentation, you'll be able to access these two because they have their DOI here, a link, and then DOI link there. So this link will then help you to access these articles and then read them more. But let's try to discuss them and see how far we can go. So because the issue here is how the learning assessed. How is learning assessed? How do we assess learning? Because we learn and then we have to go through the process of assessment. But before we answer that question, we must first understand what exactly is assessment. Assessment is a process of gathering data or gathering information about learners' achievement of learning outcomes. So in other words, when we gather data, we interpret the data, which is information about learners, then we start to decide whether we want to give feedback or we want to grade the student. So it depends what the purpose of assessment is, it's all about. So that's the number one. So there's another, there's another definition from COSA 2020, where it's defining assessment as the collection, interpreting, storing, and processing of information about learners' knowledge, skill, and values in order to provide feedback and or grade the students. So it can be for grading, or it can be for establishing what feedback should be given to our learners. So it has twofold there. Therefore, that is that definition. So now we can define. So when you start the process of collecting data, we collect information about students, we store that information, we interpret that information, so it will help us to establish what exactly do these learners know and the skills of these learners, as well as values of these learners from assessment. Then if the purpose is to grade students, then we then grade them to say they've passed this grade or they have so many percent. Or if the aim is to give feedback, then it means we'll only give feedback on the basis of what we established as the outcome of the test or the exam or assignment, etc. So the details of this article, if you want to read it fully, the one that has defined assessment as the process of gathering data, of gathering information about students' achievements of learning outcomes, you will get it there, and then you can, but if you go to Google again, you can access it from there. And then you discover that it is assessment is divided into three main categories. There's category one called formative assessment or informal assessment. You will see that when you go for your teaching practice, you will have two forms. The first form for the tutor and the mentors will be the formative assessment. Formative assessment is used to establish what students know in order to give them feedback for development. But so that's why they say it's assessment for learning. You assess them in order for them to learn better. And then we also have another one, which is called assessment of learning. Assessment of learning is called summative assessment, because you assess here after they've learned. They must learn first, and then you assess them to see what exactly, what is missing in terms of their cognitive development. Then we also have another one called assessment as learning, which is peer assessment. Here is when you give your learners an opportunity to assess one another. From there, you can take that marks and use them for formative assessment if you want, or you can also include them as part of your summative assessment. Summative assessment is for grading. So some examples are examination, test. So those that will help you to give your students some marks for grading. But formative assessment is for you to establish what your students need, and then you develop from there. You give them the support according to what seems to be missing from there. But peer assessment is where you ask them to assess one another in order to make sure that they learn how to assess. So when they learn to assess, they will be learning, because when they read other fellow colleagues' work, they will start to understand what they've missed in their own assessment task. Then they start to improve there. So that's peer assessment. But these may also contribute to the so-called continuous assessment. Continuous assessment has to do with a collection of different tasks. Those tasks will be collected in order to form a portfolio. Then from the portfolio, so it can be formative assessment issues, some tasks that were conducted through formative assessment. Others may be coming from summative assessment, some tests that were written. You accumulate them, you collect them together, and then you have some class tests that were also conducted. You can combine those to form a portfolio. Or you may make it through summative assessment. It's up to you how you do. But continuous assessment, it means they don't write exam in order for you to grade, but it's accumulation of different activities. It may be exams and that, but it's accumulation of those that constitute that portfolio in order for you to use it for grading your learners. So then as assessment usually has 4 concepts that people normally claim. The first one is that assessment improve learning. And then also they may say assessment makes students and school accountable. Assessment is beneficial to students and the institution or the school. And then assessment may also be irrelevant. So what do they mean here? When they say it improve learning, then it means, if it improves learning, it means academics may also be aware that it improves teaching and learning. And then what they'll do then, academics will give more tasks, assessment tasks to students, because they know that when they were told that there will be a task, they will like to use this issue where they'll say the assessment improves learning. So if it improves learning, they'll take advantage of that, and they read and study when the exam or when the assessment test or task is closed. So if they are going to write a test tomorrow, they may learn in order to make sure that they pass. So when they do that, it will improve their learning, because the more tests you give, the more they learn. Therefore, it will improve learning. But if you assess them only towards the end of the semester, it may not improve learning, because they may not learn, while most of our learners may like to learn only towards the test or exam. So if there is no test or exam, they may not even learn. So the better way of doing it is to give them tests maybe every month or every week, but it should have some task that they will do in order to make sure that they learn, because that will force them to learn. And then also, academics and students are aware that assessment is used to evaluate external factors. External factors are their schools, their intelligence. So in other words, when you do well through your assessment, your school is taken as if it's producing quality. And also you will also be evaluated or interpreted by other people out there as if you are intelligent, because you are able to show them, to pass all these tasks that are given to you, assessment tasks that are given to you. So that's part of accountability, where you do it, then the outside world is judging you and judging your school through your marks, through your performance. So that is that's issue of accountability. But again, academics are aware that assessment has effective impact on their emotional well-being and quality of relationships they have with their academics or with their students. So in other words here, when teachers teach, or when academics teach, or when lecturers teach, they expect their students to perform well. They expect them to get 100%. If they don't get those 100%, if they don't achieve 100%, or if they fail, then academics or teachers start to develop the so-called negative attitude towards that particular student. So if academics are not aware of that, they may start to develop that, because they will be claiming that this student does not listen, this student does not study, and this student is blah, blah, blah. You see, those issues may lead to a bad relationship between the students and their teachers. At the same time, students or learners may also expect to get a certain percentage, maybe 90s or 80s, but only to find that they've scored only 50%. That may annoy students who have worked hard if they are doing what their lecturers or their teachers are not expecting. So passing with 100% is when students are doing what their teachers are expecting as the results of that. So they are given criteria, therefore they should follow the criteria in order to satisfy those their teachers, and give, so that their teachers will give them good marks or high marks. So now that relationship may be affected if students are not doing what the lecturers are expecting them to do. At the same time, as students may also be annoyed by the fact that they've studied hard, maybe they are not getting what they think they are getting. So for that, then, formative assessment, it's important that they do those activities so that they will establish that as early as before examination, if there will be examination. So they establish that. If there is a test, they must establish that before they write the test. How they establish it, they communicate with their teachers. When they communicate with their teachers, they will know exactly what is expected of them, and then that they will benefit. Both of them, the teachers and students, will benefit from the process. But other than that, they may not benefit if they are not communicating. If one part is not communicating with the other part. And also, academics are aware that assessment may also be unfair, negative, or irrelevant. Because, for instance, if our teachers decide to write a specific test on the board, then only to find that among the students, there are students with blindness who cannot see the board. Therefore, that test it will automatically be negative to those particular students with blindness. And also, it will be unfair to these particular students and irrelevant to them, because they are not going to make it because they can't see it on the board. Therefore, teachers then should be aware that they take a variety of the situation and then give different strategies on capturing that. For instance, if they record it so that those with blindness may listen to it and then respond accordingly. And then at the same time, students also should be responsible enough to indicate their disabilities long before those assessment activities are taking place. So in the case where a student may need more time, it's better to do it in advance, indicate in advance that for me, I have this challenge, therefore we accommodate our students according to that. So as teachers, please be aware that you should be able to expect those kind of students and those challenges. Yeah, and then there are other concepts. From reading these papers, you will see that there are concepts that were used as hypotheses of generating data. One of the first hypothesis was that of accountability, where your institution or your school will be judged on the basis of your performance. So here, the claim or the hypothesis is that assessment is an accurate indicator of an institution's quality. So if you do well in those assessments, they will simply rate your institution as an institution that is offering quality education. So good institution will be that will have students who are doing well, who are performing well all the way. And then in terms of students' accountability, assessment is helping both the student and the teachers to generate a grade. So if a student is writing that test, is writing a test so that then he or she will meet the criteria of being given a certain percentage. So that percentage is for grading the students. Or if again, if teachers want to rank those students, they may use assessment as well to say, write this test. We'll see how many of you are getting distinction, how many of you are getting that. Then you have that range of things according to that. Or if you want to give someone a qualification, you check whether that person will meet the standard. Usually use summative assessment, which is exams or tests. Then you have that and then you give it to that. And also, it may improve the improvement part. When students learn, they may learn now and get a test that will give them a certain order. And then after that, then we'll give another angle of this particular situation. But even if they fail, they may still improve on what they have done. And then only to find that those students who were getting 40%, now they are getting 90s and that and that and that. So when they are getting that, you can see that they've improved through assessment. Because if they do assessment, they keep on revising what they are doing. So that's how it improves. In terms of students, it may force students to learn because they need to pass. Therefore, they may learn. So how then it improves? It will improve that when the teachers give feedback to the students so that students will improve their performance. So that's how it improves. It also improves teaching because when teachers teach and assess, then they will identify parts that influence their teaching negatively, and then correct those and adjust those accordingly. Then they have the so-called test improving teaching or assessment improving teaching. So that's how it improves. So there are other hypotheses that were also indicated in this paper. When you read them, you will see there that the test should be consistent so that it will measure whatever it's designed for. And at the same time, we have to look at the issues that may let our students down or our teachers down, where the issues of unfairness are coming through. So how do we do that? We make sure that if the test is testing what when the test or assessment task is forcing us to teach according to a specific method which we don't like, we must be able to compromise and make sure that we follow it as it is, because we are aware that assessment sometimes is not fair. If it is not fair, is unfair, we must then meet them halfway by understanding the situation. So we must not start to say, because my method of teaching is like this, is against this kind of assessment, therefore I'm not going to do it, blah, blah, blah. Developing that negative attitude towards assessment may lead to irrelevant and bad situation in terms of your performance. And it also indicated that when you file the marks or the results, you make sure that you use them, because if you don't use them, what was the whole purpose of assessing if you are not going to use those results? Use the results so that they will be a part of improvement where you are improving what you are doing. And make sure that they are free of your assessment tasks are free of errors, and then you keep on developing them so that a student will perform according to what you are doing. And there are other four important issues that you need to remember when you deal with issues of assessment. There's relevance, there's consistency, there's practicality, and also sustainability. In terms of transparency and clearly forecast, you make sure that you have a specific way of focusing on one issue. So your task must focus on one issue so that student will be able to focus on the issue, and then they learn when they focus on that one issue. So also your assessment should be integrated to your teaching and learning. It should be part of your teaching and learning. So you teach, you assess, you teach, you assess, so that you see if your learners are achieving the outcomes all the way. Then you also have to make sure that you create a specific criteria, predetermined criteria, which we call sometimes a rubric. Have a rubric, a specific rubric, which will help you to judge quality work. So if learners are starting when they learn, they must make sure that how they learn, they understand how they will be assessed, so that they look at their rubric. When they learn according to according to the requirements of those rubrics. So when you teach, you must also give them the rubrics so that they will know exactly what will happen to them when they learn. And also, the assessment should be valid, reliable, fair, and be flexible enough to allow for expanded opportunities. So in other words, when you talk about valid assessment, it means that assessment is testing what is expected to test. So you can't ask them about a donkey, but this assessment is describing a horse. So it should be according to what is described in assessment. So that alignment, it's important so that it will measure what you are planning to measure. At the same time, it should be reliable. How reliable is this? If I give you a test now, then the answer for the test is 3, 6, 8. Even if I test you again, it should expect the same answer. 3, 5, 8, etc. It should expect the very same answer, but it should not be used once. When I use it again, it's no longer measuring. So the answer that I was expecting in the previous time is different from the one that I'm expecting, unless that issue is graduating. But normally, if I test you to say, well, what is 1 + 1? You say it's 2. Tomorrow, the other day, I should have the very same answer because the test is reliable. So it should be fair as well. How fair is that? It means that even those with disabilities should be accommodated with their own disabilities. And it must be flexible enough to allow those who will come with new development on the knowledge that you are trying to test. If the knowledge that you are trying to test is not advanced in such a way that these other students who have achieved higher knowledge than that what you have tested, you need to adjust it. You be flexible enough to adjust it so that you accommodate that expanded opportunity, allow them to extend it. So it must have a variety of method or strategies. So what you also need to make sure that you accommodate there. Remember, the Department of Basic Education is talking about higher order questions, middle order questions, So in this case, here's Bloom's taxonomies to help you to measure that. These first two are referring to higher order questions. If you set questions using these keywords, you are referring to higher order, or these two words. And then these ones, these two middle ones, that's middle order. There are the keywords there. And then here, if you read this one, then you also have these keywords that indicate the lower order. So for other subjects, like mathematics, they take 30% of lower order. So which means you use questions that are coming from these two categories to constitute about 30%. And then you have those issues that are coming from these middle order questions, they constitute 50%. And those that are coming from higher order questioning or questions, they will constitute only they'll constitute only 20%. So you have 100%. Usually, these higher order questions are 20% because very few students will arrive at managing and to deal with those issues from the higher order question. But the middle order and the lower order, they should be, because for other subjects, it's 40% lower order and 40% higher order and 20% higher order. So middle order is 40, lower order 40, and then you have 20 for higher order. So that you'll see that if you take your subject, you take CAPS, you check the document, it will tell you under formal assessment that you should have that percent, that percent, that percent. So that's how you divide this. Some examples or strategies of assessment range from this one where you have observation. Observation, you observe what people are doing practically. So in other words, observation helps us to answer the question of how people do what they do. Because for instance, if you want to know how I drive the car, all what you do, you just observe me. That observation will be a good assessment of what I'm doing. Therefore, you know exactly first-hand information of how I drive the car. And then you may have the test, which will fall under a summative assessment, and exam, which also falls under summative assessment, where you give them the marks, you grade them according to that. The other strategy may be that of performance assessment or project, where you give them a research project or independent research project, or you ask them to present something, and then you measure their performance according to that. The other one, you also have interviews. Interviews help us to answer the why question, the philosophical question, why people do what they do, because we ask them questions in order to know exactly why they do what they do. And then we also have assignments. Assignment is for these are problem solving strategies where you give them assignment and then they write assignment, then you see how they solve problem through those assignments. They may be part of formative assessment if you are not going to use them to grade those students, or you may have it as part of summative assessment where you give them this assessment and then you grade them according to that, to give them marks for that, and whether the pass or fail will come from there. There's also questionnaire. Questionnaire is used mostly for survey, where you want to establish what is happening around a group of people. You then give them a questionnaire where they will answer that, and then you know exactly what they are doing. You may also have case studies where you want to describe a certain event. Different events, you ask them to describe that, is called a case study. Or you have project where you have open-ended questions that are given there, then they'll do that. And then you also have portfolio, which I indicated as part of continuous assessment. when I indicated that continuous assessment issue. So the portfolio would be part of that continuous assessment. So colleagues, then I think then we have enough of what I just indicated here. All now what you do, you must read your book accordingly. And then you make sure that in your reading, you can ask us where you have where we are stuck, then let us know. But reading your book, your prescribed book, and these articles on assessment will help you to score the higher marks if you read the books and also watch these videos, these recorded videos. Watch them. They are online. They are there waiting for you. So if you read and watch videos, you will be able to understand what exactly we are expecting of you, and then you have higher